Hello and a big warm welcome to you. My name's Marion Rose.
And I'm Lael Stone.
And welcome to the first part of a two-part podcast on food and feelings. And this part is for us as adults, which is going to be very interesting. And we thought we'd do two parts because if we're supporting our children's relationship with food, it's going to be really helpful to be looking at our own, as we always talk about, always attending to ourselves first so that we can see what is there that might need listening to so that we can help our kids.
Yeah. And, we put a call out actually on our social media channels to say, do you have any questions around food and our relationships to food? And we got a lot of responses. So this, I think, is something that a lot of people want to know about. But before we do that, Marion, how are you? Let's check in. Well, it's been a week and a bit. What's anything exciting happened for you?
So my mum had her 90th birthday. That was exciting. I really enjoyed that. Her house, her little granny flat looks like a florist at the moment still. That was so yummy. I really loved hanging out with her. We hang out with her a lot anyway. That was exciting. I've finally finished I've remade my Love Being a Mother course, which was my very first course I made 7 years ago, is when I first started online courses. And that's been a mammoth journey. I thought, I'll just edit it a bit. I'll just revise it a bit. And then 75 million hours later, I finished it.
I'm impressed. I told you I'm impressed. I'm too scared to go back and look at my earlier work because I'll be like, oh, that's not okay. And that's not okay. I'm like, this is why we grow and progress and expand, Yeah. That's exciting.
How about you? How's your 2 weeks been?
Well, still in lockdown, but apparently we're getting out of lockdown. So anyone who's been listening to this will know we've here in Melbourne have been in lockdown forever.
Like Groundhog Day, isn't it? It'll be a real surprise when you don't say that.
But it's interesting. There's a lot of feelings that go with that. Anyway, that's a whole other topic. But good. I have been super challenged this week on letting go, watching my beautiful 2 adult children are getting ready to prepare to move out of home, and that's exciting and brings a lot of feelings. And I know, most of our listeners are people who've got little kids. So you probably can't even conceive of like, oh God, I just want them to be able to put their own seatbelt on or just I want to go to the toilet on my own. It's a whole other just letting go and surrender as your beautiful big children are ready to fly the nest. And, my kids have gone overseas and they've done stuff before, but there's something really final about them moving out of home and setting up their own lives. And it's wonderful and it's exciting. And it means we're going to have one child at home. And I just turned to my husband and went, I think we're going to need another dog. Like, let's get a puppy. Let's get something. Because I'm like, so anyway, we'll see. Anyway, but that's what's alive in my week at the moment. So just navigating that. It's really great to know as a parent, even as your kids get older, it still brings up lots of beautiful edges for you. And so, I've been leaning into those things, but it's good. It's good. All right, let's dive into talking about food. For some people, like I know that food for them is like one of the greatest loves of their lives. Like I have a few friends who are such foodies, right? Who they think about what they're going to eat. They get so, they plan it. There's so much love and passion in food. And it is, it's something that they go, I think about it all the time when I'm at work. I dream about what I'm going to eat and I'm like, what? That's amazing. That isn't necessarily where food sits with me. For me, I grew up in a family, and it's quite interesting, I think, I often talk about imprints or what we were shown growing up. And I grew up in a pretty standard Australian family where food was definitely not our love language, right? We had the same meal kind of on Wednesday nights as we did on Friday nights. And there wasn't, I would say, a lot of love put into the food that was made. Food was just you just need to fuel your body. So it wasn't, there was no rituals around it. There was no great love or passion put into it. It was just something. So I then married a Hungarian man, and being Eastern European, everything is about food and it's all about flavors and rituals. And he grew up having a 3-course meal every night of his life, right? They would wait for his dad to go home from work and they would, so I then married into his family, and I think he learned early on, yes, you're not going to be like my mum and cook food and do all that stuff. So, for me, food has been, it's something you got to do to kind of fuel your body. And it's never been a huge passion or love of mine. And then being a mum for 21 years and just making food that everybody will eat, which is nutritious and wholesome, felt like, oh my God, when I cracked a meal that everybody liked, I was like, yes, this is like a triumph, right? But food has never been a huge thing for me, in the sense of, I don't know, it just doesn't have a charge. There's other things where my energy goes if stuff feels big in my world. So it isn't one of my, I guess, sweet spots where, like as a huge control pattern or anything like that. And it also, I've had to learn to, I think, put a lot more love into my food. My husband, whenever I'm cooking, he's like, remember the love, Lael, put the love in, because he goes, it tastes better with the love. And I'm like, I ain't got time for love. I've got 3 kids. Like, I need to get food on the table in 15 minutes. And we have a running joke. Like, he's a great cook, but he takes like 3 hours to make a meal. I can knock something out in 20 minutes flat, right? I am like efficient, great. I could feed 20 people really, really quickly. Whereas he's going to like cut up everything perfectly and put it in bowls and listen to music as he's doing it. He's like, it's all about the love. And I'm like, no, I ain't got time for love. So we sit in 2 very different places, which our kids love to joke about often. And he's actually taught me a lot about appreciating food and the love and the beautiful elements that food can bring when people are brought together and eating and sharing meals and putting a lot of love and stuff into it. So I've learned a lot thanks to my beautiful husband. But that's where I kind of sit with food. I would be happy. I've said this all the time. I would be happy just drinking a cup of tea, Vegemite toast, which I know if you're not Australian, you're like, that sounds disgusting, but it's what you grow up with. I would be happy eating Vegemite toast and drinking tea for most meals. Like I don't really crave for stuff. I would eat very, very simply if I didn't have a family I had to feed. So food's definitely not such a huge thing for me. Many other things are, but for me, that's kind of been my relationship to food. What about you, Marion? Tell me all about where's it been for you?
Yeah, I would say probably a little bit similar growing up. That wasn't really a big thing, but also, yeah, also not lots of love. I remember watching, what was it called? Chocolat or Like Water for Chocolate? Which one was it? Maybe both of them. Like Water for Chocolate, I think, maybe in the 90s. And like, oh my God, and I think that was the first time I was like, oh, that like the quality of your presence when you're making meals. But what I do remember, I did also used to have with food, like in my teens and early 20s, like a kind of quite a distorted relationship with food. Food and feelings were very tied up for me. I couldn't differentiate hunger and tiredness. That took a lot. I started therapy when I was 21. I started training as a therapist when I was 24. And actually, without really focusing a lot on food, because I was doing lots of crying and lots of expressing feelings, that really shifted away. And what I did find right from that time is then I've done things really differently with food. Like right from back then, I haven't really done like 3 meals a day and you eat at set times. I've always kind of really listened to myself. Ever since then, I go through phases. Oh, big thunder. I've gone through phases of like, I like to eat a particular thing a lot. And then my body's like, oh, I've had enough of that. And I don't eat at set times. So I really have listened to my body a lot. And I'm remembering when my kids were little and I was still with their dad, and we used to go out to this particular cafe and we'd always have chocolate mousse cake first before the savory. And then, as we'll be talking about in the next podcast, we did really like the self-directed approach with them, and that really fitted for me. That's really how I've been in relationship with food for quite a long time. However, chocolate has always been a big control pattern of mine. That's been one of my main control patterns until about 4.5 months ago. And I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, but I was having all these symptoms and I really changed my whole food really radically. And I went on a heavy metal detox. And from similar to you, where I've always been a bit like food, I could live on smoothies. You could eat Vegemite and toast and tea. I could live on smoothies. But suddenly, from changing my whole diet, I was I was in love with food and like in love with vegetables and greens, and I was having these massive green salads and green, just like obsessive. And I was like, oh, now I understand what this whole thing about, like, oh, food is amazing, has been like. Yeah, so that's me. I think food's wonderful. I don't know if I'll ever eat chocolate again. I think for me, chocolate is, it's a bit like alcohol and alcoholics. It's like I often can't just, have a little bit
Have
of
a
chocolate.
little piece.
Yeah.
See,
And
I can just have one tiny square. Like I can just have one square and go, yeah, that was great. And then I can leave it. Yeah. I have friends who are like, oh no, if you have one, you have the whole block. And I'm like,
exactly.
oh no, I can't do that.
No.
Like
And
it's so interesting, isn't it?
no,
Our relationship to it.
exactly. And my kids, because especially my daughter, we did the whole, as we're going to talk about next week, the self-led approach. And my kids have both got, it's a running joke, like Easter eggs from years ago in the fridge. I'm like, I buy my local love, my organic chocolate, and it's, it's gone that day or the next day. So but also I do want to say I really resonate with you. After, I think once Lionel was about 3, so that's about 16 years ago, I was like, I'm so over cooking. So for years, and also being a single mama, I only cooked things that really had like 3 ingredients was the maximum for me. If it could be 2 ingredients, that was it. So again, recently that has changed, but for many years I was just like, that just needs to be simple for me because I've got so many other things to be doing. So yeah, I'm enjoying refinding the love of a bit more variety now.
It's beautiful. That's beautiful. And one of the questions that we had came in was, you know, can food be treated as celebratory or happy and fun, nostalgic, all that kind of stuff, which I absolutely believe it can. So my in-laws are Hungarian and they cook some Hungarian dishes that are really simple foods, but it's because my kids grew up having that, and my husband as well. They love it. And so sometimes if my mother-in-law will drop over a goulash or she'll drop over some food, everyone's like, oh yes, and they love it. And it's a beautiful celebratory thing because it's something that nanny's made and it reminds them of their childhood. And I mean, I don't think there's, no offense to my mum, there's anything that she made when I was a kid that I'd be like, yes, let's eat that again, because it was always not so fabulous. So again, I think it depends what you grow up with, but I actually think it can, it's a beautiful thing, and we even when we have birthdays or celebrations or catch up with our family, my kids do really love a beautiful spread of food and they celebrate it, and it's not overindulged, and it's, but it's just, how wonderful we're getting. It's more about the people, and we're getting together, and there's a vehicle that we're using to do that, and there is a lot of joy with it without it having to be the main thing or without it being obsessed around it. And I absolutely do believe we can have a healthy balance with it. I really do see that. And, one of the things we wanted to talk about, particularly firstly around the parent, is our relationship to food, perhaps what we're modeling to our children, the charge we might have around it. For me, the food, and we'll talk about this with the kids as well, it can be a control pattern. It also can be a way of controlling kids not wanting to eat and then wanting to eat a lot. There's many, many things that go with our relationship to food. And so I always love to start with, well, where do we sit as adult? What's our relationship? What do we watch growing up in our family? What was shown to us about food? I have some friends who grew up in a family where they were not allowed to leave the table until they finished everything on their plate, right? And so, that then, as they grew into adults, was, I have to eat even when I'm not hungry, or because it's in front of me, I have to finish everything. That's what they learned. That's what they were shown. So, and again, we can see this a lot with messages we may have got from our parents, whether don't eat too much, you'll get fat, or, don't have another one of those. Like there's a lot of, I think, unconscious imprints that we can take on board when we're children due to our parents' relationship to food and how they feel about it.
And I would say that's probably the main way that it gets passed down. I actually wanted to go back to what you were saying, that question. I'd love to read it out, actually. It's interested to hear your thoughts on whether food can be treated as celebratory, happy, fun, nostalgic without that view or treatment being seen as dysfunctional. I tend to think that as like it's almost like the essence of aware parenting, that almost anything can be done presence, with connection, to actually be, to provide more of that, more connection with ourselves, more pleasure, more connection with others. Or we can use that very same thing to suppress feelings. We can, it can be a control pattern. So food can be something we do to absolutely suppress feelings, to dissociate, to distract ourselves, and it can be used to help us really, really deeply connect with ourselves, our body, the pleasure that we feel, our needs, and with our community, with our family. And I think that's the amazing thing about almost anything from an aware parenting perspective. It's so often not the thing itself, but it's our relationship with the thing. And I think we'll probably be talking about this, is the fact that if we're using food as a control pattern, even in that moment, there's always the opportunity to put in that antidote. The antidote to suppression is connection. It's always available in there. So I wanted to add that a little bit. I wanted to add something I wanted to say about, you're saying about birthdays. I love creating platters, food platters for birthdays. You like those? I love those. That's my best. I'd eat platters every day of the week.
I love it. It's a beautiful way to eat. There's choice and there's color, and there's
something about that, and sweet and savory. It's almost like the epitome again of trusting and having that for everybody, so everyone can go, oh, I'd like 4 of the bananas, and like some dates, and like some crackers, and I like some of that cheese, and whatever it is. That's like the epitome of it's like hunter-gatherer in the land of milk and honey, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting point. If as children we weren't given choice around what we could eat, if we were just told we have to eat something, that again can set up some interesting stories for us around our relationship to food. And one of the things we'll definitely talk about next week is giving our children choice and autonomy around what they eat and when they eat, and how we can trust that. And that's a big question that came up with a lot of what people wrote around, how do we trust them to know when it's enough, or when they're trying to use it as a control pattern. And I just want to clarify too, if people are listening to this and they haven't heard our other podcasts, when we say control pattern, what we're meaning is something that we do to suppress our feelings. So if you're really upset because you had a bad day at work and you want to come home and eat the whole tub of ice cream, or you want to drink all the wine, or anything that we do to, on some level, numb ourselves out so we don't necessarily have to feel. That's what we mean by control pattern. And we've got other podcasts on this that you can go and listen to if you want to learn more about it. Okay, should we dive into some more of these questions, Marion, so we can answer them specifically?
Let's do that. Do you want to?
Okay, so there's one here that says, I'm wondering how I keep up the habit of emotional eating whilst in lockdown homeschooling, whilst also trying to role model healthy eating for my child. She started smelling chocolate on my breath, and there's only so many times I can sneak a piece of chocolate in the bathroom. I feel for you. I really hear this. I just want to firstly say, look, having to navigate lockdown and schooling our children, all the trickiness that has come through this period in time is really, really big. And I want to send a lot of empathy to however you're feeling. I mean, part of me is like, as we're getting through lockdown, and, I have been here in Melbourne, I don't know how many days we've done it for, but it's the most anywhere in the world. I got to a point, it's like, I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to get through this. So sometimes if that's what we have to do, that's what we have to do, because we're living in circumstances that are very, very challenging, and it's our way on some level of protecting ourselves. And we often talk about that with control patterns. It's not bad. It is just our way of going, hey, how do I keep myself safe here? Or how do I navigate what I'm feeling so I don't blow out, or I don't end up screaming at my kids, or I don't, get too upset. I'm trying to just protect myself. So I mean, what I would say to this lovely mum is that it's got to be a balance, right? Between how do I navigate what we're getting through at the moment. And I mean, my other suggestion is it's okay to own that's what I'm doing right now, because that's what I feel like I need to do to get through this time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when people often start knowing about aware parenting and realizing about control patterns, they can often get really judgmental about control patterns, including food as a control pattern, and judgmental of themselves. And I know I went through that process. And the paradox is, if we're judging ourselves or judging our kids, that's going to mean we've got even more pain. So we're going to have even less presence. So I always like to think of a control pattern, whether it's food or whatever it is it's basically showing us that we don't in that moment have enough either internal capacity to be lovingly present with what we're feeling, or external loving support to listen to us. So really that's all it tells us in that moment, is that's the invitation. Oh, do I have enough capacity to be with this feeling? Could I phone a friend? And if not, that's what we need to do. I mean, basically we come inbuilt with this capacity to feel and to release feelings and to heal through expression of feelings. And we also come with, it's almost like the matching thing that goes with that is the capacity to suppress a feeling. So it's actually really amazing to be able to do that. And exactly as you said, if we can have compassion with ourselves, that means we're actually going to be more likely to have capacity to listen to the feelings. If we say, oh my gosh, I so hear. One of the suggestions I used to say to people is, if you have that desire, like to go to the fridge, to go to the chocolate bar, whatever it is even just lovingly saying, just even for one moment, as you're making your way to the fridge, I'm imagining I've got some feelings here right now, or I'm imagining I'm upset, or I can feel I'm stressed. Hand on the heart, just even a little bit more presence is going to mean the likelihood of needing less to do that. And also, like I experienced with the therapy, there are two ways that we can go in. We can just generally get more loving support, have more listening, have an empathy buddy, see a web parenting instructor, a therapist, a counselor. Basically, the more we have feelings listened to, the less need we have to suppress them. Or we can go in with actually meeting every time we are feeding ourselves to suppress feelings with, oh, okay, could I feel this here, or is there absolutely no way? Is it just like, I really need to go, what do you say, going into the bathroom? I remember that when my kids were little, I just popped to the fridge every now and again to get a bit of chocolate, sometimes when I was really stressed. It's just so much love and compassion, isn't it? These control patterns, we've developed them because when we were growing up, the people around us didn't have the understanding or capacity to be lovingly listening to those feelings. Totally. So they saved us. And I think that's the thing to really shift around. This is amazing. It's an amazing thing that we're doing. It was amazing when we were little. They probably saved us from being shamed, being punished, being excluded, having a time out, when we actually needed to have a really big cry. So I think the more we can reframe these things is actually really helpful and really beneficial when we don't have other ways to deal with it. I think that can be really helpful.
I agree totally. And I think even in that point, she was saying, how can I model healthy eating? And there was another comment here I just want to say too, from another mum. My mother unconsciously gave me lots of body insecurity from a childhood and lifetime of her focus on her own weight and dieting and negative comments about mine. How do I make sure to not repeat this hurt onto my child? I think it brings an awareness to us of what are we modeling to our children. And that can be when you eat the broccoli, you're like, I love broccoli, it tastes so great. I also love chocolate, that also tastes so great. Like, we don't want to make sweets wrong. We don't want to make it something that's not okay and I shouldn't have that because it's bad. How can we delight in it as something that is wonderful for us as well? But it is about the balance, and it is about standing there as an adult. You might go, what does my body feel like today? You know what? I feel like a smoothie today, so I'm going to make one for myself. Like, even modeling that, tuning into your body. What do I feel like today? Or, you know what? I feel like I really want something sweet. Maybe I have some berries, and then maybe I might have some chocolate. Like, none of it's bad. It's just, again, the energy that we attach to it. So I think it's really important when we're thinking about what we're modeling to our children. Do we talk about food in a positive way? Do we make stuff sound wrong, or we shouldn't have that, or too much of this? And it's not even what we're saying, it's also what we're thinking, and then how our relationship is. So I often find, look, body image is, as a whole other podcast, and it's huge. And there we do have another question here about how do we shift and change that huge imprint from society that's been around for a long, long time around how we should look. I think one of the greatest gifts we can give our children is learn to love our bodies, is learn to be compassionate to ourselves. Exactly what you just said before, Marion, about being compassionate. I might be eating this chocolate because I don't have the capacity at the moment to feel what I'm feeling, and that is okay. Or how can I lean into some support or listening or that kind of stuff so I can feel into what is there, I think we have to absolutely come back to being compassionate to ourselves, for loving our bodies, for the amazing job that they do, for starting internally with that deep self-love and acceptance. That's what our children feel. I mean, I think I've shared this in one of our other podcasts. I was so adamant for my girls growing up that I didn't want them to feel any shame around their bodies, and I wanted them to feel fabulous. And I was always telling them how magnificent their bodies were and how strong they were and how amazing. And you know, again, I didn't really have a charge around food, but I remember the time where I took my daughter to go and buy some, you know, athletic stuff that she needed to wear. And she's standing there and she's like 9, and she's standing in front of the mirror and she's going, I don't like this part on my hips. I mean, she was 9, she's still little. And I remember just going, no, I have worked so hard for you not to feel anything but joy about your body, right? And I remember almost slumping in the change room on the ground going, oh my God, I failed, or it's arrived this point. And I remember thinking, this is bigger than me, right? Like, this is society that sends us messages constantly that says you're not okay the way you are. And it was a point where I had to just look at her and I said, oh, sweetie, perhaps the journey of being in a female body, and maybe in a male body, but being human, is we're going to come up against these pieces that we don't think are okay. And it's okay to feel like that. And it's also okay to dive into all the pieces that go with that. And it was in that moment that I thought, I cannot protect my children from this, but all I can do is keep loving myself and my own body and my relationship to it, and let that be the essence that filters and washes over them. And sure enough, as they've become adults now, you know, they share sometimes, I don't like this bit, but mostly their love for their bodies and their acceptance of it is far greater than what I ever felt when I was a teenager. So I think it comes back to, again, how do we model healthy eating? How do we model a good relationship to food? Well, we have to firstly start with, well, what was my story? What was I shown? Is there some healing that's needed around that? And how can I move into deep compassion with myself so that that is the energy that our children feel?
There are so many elements, aren't there, as you're speaking and thinking, you know, there's cultural conditioning, there's judgment and shaming, there's the fact that we live, you know, in a way that's actually kind of very abnormal in some way compared to what we would have done when we didn't have shops where we could get almost anything at any point of the year. So there's that whole thing in terms of how we've evolved to be in relationship with food. There's the extent to which we are able to still hear what our body needs and doesn't need, and when we're full and when we're hungry. Then there's, you know, how we were treated as a child, what we experienced. I mean, there's so many different elements to food, which is the religion, the culture that we've grown up in. There are so many different factors, aren't there? So no wonder it's incredibly multifaceted and often complex. And I think it can be really helpful to notice, well, which one of these are we being invited to attend to right at the moment? Is it, you know, do we judge ourselves around how we look, or do we judge ourselves for what we eat? You know, what are we doing? Are we listening to ourselves even when we feel thirsty and hungry? Do we actually listen to those signals? And there's so many different elements, aren't there, that we can attend to. So I think it's that really listening. What am I being invited to look at right now?
Yes, 100%. And for me, I guess my big thing is I wanted food to be not a thing. So we don't really make it a thing. We don't have a charge around it. Like, if my kids, when they're little, like, I'm not hungry, I'd be like, okay, you sure you've tuned into what your body needs? And I would trust that my kids would kind of go, actually, this is what I feel like, or, you know, and I mean, I find my biggest challenge now with having adult, you know, people in my house is constantly, I'm like, what do you want to eat for dinner? I'm sick of thinking what to make. I have like full like decision fatigue. I'm like, why do you all have to keep eating? And I mean, what I've done definitely through lockdown is I'm like, I'm so over all the food making. Everybody's cooking now, so everybody takes in turns, which is great, and I don't have to do it. But that's also been amazing, because you realize as a parent, I influence what my children have eaten, because usually it was like what I wanted to eat, and so that's what I was doing. And now it's really interesting having everybody else in my family cook, you know, what they're choosing to make. And it's actually great. I'm like, I'll eat anything anybody else makes for me. So that's great. But I think it just got, again, there's so many layers as you talk about, Marion, around the different elements that impact us and our feelings and our beliefs around food. And you know, I just keep coming back to, I want them to have a healthy relationship to food. So what would that feel like, or what would perhaps that look like, and what do I need to do for me to shift anything so that that is, you know, that feels good for them.
So yummy. I'm also thinking in terms of us as adults, our relationship with food can often be really related to receiving and presence. So I've noticed for myself, I've been really playing with, as I notice when I bring my shopping home, that I would tend to just do it. I wouldn't be so present as I was putting things away. And I realized that recently. And so I've made a really deliberate choice to actually become really present and just breathe and take my time, so that I'm preparing, like the cutting up the celery to put it in the jar, to put it in the fridge, all of those things, to actually be really present. And I've really noticed that's related to the inner work I've been doing around receiving, and actually really receiving the food that actually comes into my home, which is related to also receiving the food that comes into my body, and all the other receivings. And I'm actually remembering, do you remember many years ago, Lael, when I used to come down to Melbourne and we ran that workshop together? And one of the things was about receiving, wasn't it? And we were asking people about their relationship with receiving. So that could be another exploration. It's like just really observing, how do you feel? Like, how do you feel when if you're cooking? Are you, and again, I used to notice I would be half doing something else at the same time. And in this recent shift I've made, it's like I'm really back again to be present with the food whilst I'm cooking it and really enjoying it. And so there's so much wonderfulness that we can do. And that, I suppose that's what I would offer, is, to me, one of the main things about aware parenting is about a quality of presence and a capacity to feel present in our bodies whilst we're doing something, whatever it is. And that could be going out, buying food, bringing food into the home, putting it away, cooking it, eating it. How much in all of those situations as adults are we actually feeling what we're feeling, and how much are we more kind of in a bit of fight or flight, or rushing, or thinking, or, you know, just doing something else? And I think that in itself can bring quite a shift. We're actually like, because that's how I see we would have been naturally in relationship with food when we needed to go and find it, or hunt it, or grow it ourselves. It would have been such a deep relationship, wouldn't there? It would have been such an embodied experience of knowing these little leaves are coming up, so we've got some, you know, some carrots growing, or I can see footprints here, so I'm, you know, I know that the kangaroo's over there, or it's, you know, it's the first full moon in September, so the berries are going to be growing on the trees. You know, it's about an embodied relationship with the earth, with the land, with our bodies. And in this modern world, it's very easy to be completely disconnected from all of that, because, you know, especially we're just going to a shop and buying it. So again, also things like going to the market. I've been going to our local farmers market. So this is not for people in lockdown, obviously, although even in lockdown, most you can go out and get food, but going out and actually going to the farmers market each week and actually buying it from the people who are growing the food, and talking to them and seeing it when it's, you know, it's just been picked fresh that morning. And I've got all these baskets that I'm carrying, so I actually need to carry it all. There's something about feeling that more that I've found really helpful in terms of, yeah, more present and embodied relationship with food. And for each of us, we're going to have our own way of doing that. So I'm wondering if any of these spark anything for anybody about how you would like to be in relationship with food.
It's such a beautiful point. How present are we when we're eating? Do we just kind of quickly shove the food in because we have to tend to kids, or are we looking at our emails or on our phone while we're eating? Or how, it's such a beautiful point. How present are we with what we're eating and drinking and putting into our bodies? It's really important. Like I am, I
actually want to say, it's really reminding me, years ago in my 20s, I used to go on lots of retreats and do various things like that. And I remember, I'm sure you've been on them as well. And I remember one, it was a it was a retreat and we needed to do like eat in like, you know, with that quality of presence. And I remember it's, you know, half an hour to eat, you know, 35 minutes, and every moment of eating the food. And so again, that could be a reframe, you know, if you're a parent of a young child who's maybe slow eating, how would that be? Could that be an invitation to actually really slow down and also savor and notice, you know, particularly younger children who are exploring food? And I know we're talking more about children next time, but, you know, if they're exploring food and playing with it and wanting to feel it, you know, could we reclaim something for ourselves in actually doing that, going back to how we would have been as younger beings when we were like, what's this? And this smells like that. And gosh, that's a bright color. And wow, those colors look nice together. And oh, this texture is like really crunchy. And oh, but that's, oh, I don't like that. I do like that. So really refining again, because to me, again, if we want the antidote to suppression, to control patterns, if we want to actually come alive with food, it really does mean, doesn't it, being present with it, to actually feel it, taste it, touch it, look at it. That's the way to actually become more present again.
Yeah, I love that. It's making me think. There's this one dish I make and I use about 10 different vegetables. It's really colorful.
10, that's amazing.
And I always sit there and go, every time I serve it, I go, how magnificent does this look? Because there's so many colors. And everyone's like, okay, mum. But I always say it every time. And it's making me think it's maybe the child in me going, wow, you're eating a rainbow. Yeah, that's beautiful. What a beautiful reminder.
There is a rainbow diet, isn't there? And that's the thing. I think the other thing are a million different approaches to food, and I think that's part of it as well. Rather than thinking there's one size fits all, that depending on our lineage, you know, like you with Mikey, you know, historical lineage, our body type, that's so unique. The relationship with food is so unique for each person. That can mean in a family, it can be quite tricky. I know for me, with the three of us, I cook most of the time different things for each of us still, you know, so it's like really trusting that each of us do have different things that we love and don't.
Totally. Oh, we can definitely talk about that next week, because yeah, like my middle daughter grew up for a while only wanting to eat white things. So when parents come to me and go, my child will only eat this, like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. And I'm happy to say now she'll eat everything and she's got amazing varied taste. But for a while there, it was just like, nope, it's just that. Anyway, we'll dive into that next week. This was a beautiful question, which I thought we could offer some insight into. It says, I'm hoping you'll include information on how to help myself or my child when older female family members talk about food negatively. For example, we had a big lunch, so no dinner for us, or you won't need dinner now. Or at a birthday, and oh no, I should not eat the cake dessert. I get so cranky because it's disordered eating talk, but I don't know what to do about it. Your wisdom would be appreciated. Thank you. That's such a great question. Do you want to respond to that, Marion?
I was thinking, oh, I'd love to respond to that. Number one, I find it always really helpful with, especially what you say, older female family members is thinking, this is probably what they experienced, internalized. They're just doing, you know, trying to do what we all do, which is pass down what we acquired. So I think finding a way of like seeing compassionately, that's what's going on for them. That's how they are in relationship with their body. And oh my gosh, how uncomfortable would that be? And can we be even a little bit compassionate with them? Number one. And then again, I think it's like similarly to what you were saying, is that really listen lovingly to whatever feelings show up. Maybe we need to go and express how frustrated we feel or how concerned we feel that this is going to be passed on to our child or children. So again, getting to express all our feelings so that we feel more centered in ourselves. So actually in the moment we have more likelihood of saying, you know, offering our own perspective from that really centered place is like, oh, you know, so what were these suggestions? Oh, you know, I know we had a big lunch, but I'm still hungry, so I'm so looking forward to my dinner. Or you maybe even reflecting it back. Are you telling yourself you shouldn't have the cake, but do you love cake, sweet, you know, auntie or mum or granny, would you love some cake? I so support you in having cake if you want cake, you know. So it can be even like offerings at a more compassionate lens, you know. So often, you know, each generation has often become more friendly, but you know, there was so much harshness and shoulding and shaming around food, you know, each generation up. So could we offer them a bit more love? Could we offer them a different possibility that you could actually enjoy the cake? You can enjoy the dinner. You can enjoy having a snack before dinner. You know, all of those rules that have been around that kind of passed down from the Victorian era, you know, no, sit down and you have to do it like this. You know, I don't know why I'm putting that accent on, but you know, to actually have fun with food and enjoy it and get rid of the shoulds and the have tos and the guilt and all that stuff. Our bodies are so wise. We come back to that, don't we, in aware parenting? Our bodies, and we're going to talk about this a lot next week, they know what they need, they know when they need it, they know what foods we need and what we don't. I mean, if we come back to that, release that cultural conditioning and the childhood hurts, the more we come back to that. So can we offer that a little bit to the next generation?
Yeah, I love that. There's such beautiful wisdom there. It's reminding me of, that was not such a thing for me with food, but that was such a big thing around self-care. Like, and my mother and then my grandmother and like the lineage of women I came from was, you don't stop, you just keep going. And so then when I did want to stop, or I did, like, or their, you know, their thinking was, oh, I've got to do this now, I'll keep going. And, you know, the martyrdom that they would carry of doing all the things and putting themselves last. And the massive shift I had to come to in myself to go, no, actually self-care is the greatest gift I can give myself. I love myself enough to have care. I love myself enough to say no, or to set this limit, or to look after myself. And it was really uncomfortable when I was first doing it, because I just went into, oh God, I'm lazy if I'm stopping, or all the stories that have gone with it. But then when I started to claim it for myself, it, you know, whenever they would exactly say something, I'd almost giggle or laugh, and I'd be like, oh, you know that you're worthy of sitting down, you're still enough, do you know you're amazing, even if you put your feet up. Like, it became beautiful, exactly what you said. It was compassionate and it was gorgeous, and there was no charge in it for me, because I was like, well, actually I have learned that looking after me is the greatest gift I can give my family. And then that's what my daughters then felt and watched in me. So it really reminds me, as you talk about that, about food, about when we can shift and change that pattern in ourselves and look at it, where we've come from, with deep compassion and understanding, then we're not likely to pass it on to our kids, you know. And it may be something that our children go, gosh, Granny's really judgy around food, isn't she? And we can be like, yeah, she is. What do you reckon's gone on for her that's made her feel like that? You know, children are smart and they get it and they watch. And then as they get older, they begin to see it and go, oh yeah, I can see that there's a story for them in that. And I still love them, but that's their story, you know. So that's such a beautiful example, Marion, of just that. Yeah, just again, compassion for where they've come from is really important.
And I'd actually love to add as well, and like if you look a little bit more deeply, and I've worked with many people, as I'm sure you have, is when we actually look into the lineage of the history. Like, I know for my mum, she was born in 1931, so it was in the Depression, and you know, the relationship with food then, of course, it was like, you know, scarcity and all of that kind of stuff, and how much that, to use your word, imprints and still impacts people, you know, many decades later. So I think as well, and thinking about, you know, if you have an Irish heritage, the potato famine, you know, looking at it, you go far enough back in most lineages, and at some point in time, you know, food, there was a whole issue around survival and food. And so again, I think to really hold with deep compassion that some of this can be really deep work to actually tend to these places in ourselves. And you know, that might be underlying, you know, having a really strong desire to eat a lot can be really powerful. The other thing I've really noticed in exploring with Mary Walker, who we've worked together, is I suddenly realized that when I was eating oats, I suddenly had this desire, lots and lots of oats. I really wanted to eat oats, and I would feel this gorgeous feeling in my body of like this wholeness. And then I suddenly thought, well, so much of my ancestors are from Scotland and would have been eating a lot of oats. And so again, it's like really, this food can really deeply connect us, not only, as I was saying before, about with our land, with our bodies, but with our lineage, with actually what, you know, where we've come from in really profound ways, so we can reclaim. Most of us have been so colonized that we we don't have relationships with those lineages, but often our bodies will show us. You may find that you want to eat goulash, and then you realize that you're from Eastern Europe, or whatever it is. That's, again, it's really trusting. What do I love? What do I feel called to eat? What do I just hunger for, literally?
That's beautiful. Such a beautiful way to look at it. Here's another interesting question, which I thought was good. This person said, I gave up alcohol, but eating affects my ability to parent. If my sugar levels go lower, I'm craving something and don't satisfy the craving, I find my patience levels are affected. And I have a lot of feelings to release, but I just don't feel like I always have the time and space to cry whenever I'm craving certain foods. How do we limit this control pattern while parenting?
So again, I say, as we've already said, so much compassion. To really, I'm just trying to get to it so I can read this question as well. So much compassion, giving up alcohol, which is often, again, a huge way to suppress feelings. I also find it really helpful to remember, and I love how Aletha talks about this in Aware Parenting, because it's the same with children. If we give up something that has been a control pattern, but we don't attend to the feelings that control pattern has been suppressing, we're going to need to do something else to suppress those feelings, because those feelings are going to be there and they're going to be bubbling up. So again, I think so much compassion. If you give up alcohol and you start chewing gum, for example, or biting your nails or getting really busy, again, so much compassion. If we didn't need to do these things, we wouldn't do them. I wonder if there's some things, I know some people talk about if you've got sugar cravings, because, again, with these things, some of it's hunger, some of it's control patterns, but some of it's also physiologically what sugar does to the body. I know for me, it takes about 2 weeks if I give up sugar to then I just stop craving it. So often we can maybe eat, depending on where you look at, you can eat protein to actually try and, so maybe finding some other way to suppress the feelings that actually doesn't then lead to the patient's levels being affected. So, okay, if you want to suppress feelings, could you scroll Instagram for 5 minutes instead of eating a whole load of sugar? Again, like you said, it's using control patterns as our helpers. The more we actually choose to use them when we don't have some other, when we don't have capacity, when we don't have someone to talk with us, it can really help. Or, what I find really helpful is Xoxo. Xoxo is like a messaging app. So if you have a friend, it's really great as a parent, particularly as a mum, if you're home a lot, and it's not going to be easy in any moment to phone up a friend and say, gosh, I'm feeling really stressed, I just want to eat a whole chocolate cake. To actually have a setup on Messenger or WhatsApp Xoxo, and just to go in when you feel upset and just say, leave a message for your friend, because just knowing that they're going to listen is going to mean you get that sense of being heard. And that might be, I'm really stressed right now, I just really want to eat and eat and eat. I'm actually already feeling that relief of knowing that you're being heard. So again, finding ways, can you get your needs met to be listened? And if not, can you use a control pattern that's that's going to have less deleterious effects than the big sugar rush is going to have?
Yeah, I think that's really important. Again, everybody's body is different, but I used to have really full-on sensitive blood sugar levels. So if I didn't eat every 2.5 hours, I'd have massive crashes. And that's when my kids were really little. And what I realized was, for me, well, firstly, I started doing some fasting stuff so that it kind of rebalanced my blood sugar levels. But again, I'm not giving anybody advice on what you should do with their body. You've got to go find what's right for you. But I also realized that I was so in the just put my kids' needs first. And instead of actually, what do I need? Do I need to sit down and just have a cup of tea for a minute? Do I need to spend just a few more minutes making myself something wholesome or fulfilling that need? Then I wasn't looking for the quick fixes or looking for those places to check out as much, because I was actually claiming, part of me that I need is then going to be able to look after you in the way that I want to. And so it was a lot that was tied a lot to me, to my having those boundaries for myself, or having those well, the self-care thing again, it came back to that. I was so in the sacrifice of just give, and my needs were way down the bottom, and then nobody's winning. So that kind of played out a lot with my food or how I was feeling. So that was that was something for me that I really noticed too, that was tied into what would it look like to take care of myself really well and meet those needs, because then it also helps my family.
I love that, Lael. Do you know what comes for me? The question is, am I willing to be nourished? Am I willing to be nourished? Because food being one of the ways, as a mother, if we are really, again, comes back to receiving, if we're willing to receive and willing to receive the nourishment of the food or the smoothie or the cup of tea, and even if that's actually pausing for 3 breaths and actually feeling the tea in our hands, or actually feeling the warmth of the toast, or the feeling the bowl with the warm porridge and eating it. Even, this doesn't need to be like 3/4 of an hour eating food, because often we're not going to have that time as a parent or as a mother. But even just slowing down for like 3 seconds can actually help us be more present, so we can receive the nourishment, which means, as you say, our needs are going to be more met. We're going to be have more capacity with our kids. It can be really simple things, can make a huge difference, can't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes just the mindset, that shifting, that can bring about change. So there was really just one more, I think, theme that came up in some of the questions, which was just about shame, about weight, about eating, about then feeling really worried about passing that on to their children. And so, I mean, we've talked to quite a few of those themes already today around, just being aware of where we're using food when we don't want to feel. But I just wanted to touch on a little moment that, particularly as a child, if we did not have good imprints around eating and we ate to help ourselves feel better, and as you explained so beautifully, Marion, we were using it as a control pattern to keep ourselves okay. And then we created a story around our body that it's not okay, or we got bullied, or we got shamed for being overweight or underweight, or whatever it looked like, however it was playing out. I think is such another beautiful invitation into deep compassion for our stories. And I know that a few people wrote saying, I'm really scared that I'm going to pass it on to my children again, or I'm watching my children do the same thing. So again, we come back to, can you meet that part of yourself gently and compassionately? Perhaps it is working it through with somebody else to talk to about it, whether that's a therapist, a web parenting instructor, somebody who can hold that space for you to potentially go back to the child in you that was doing that to stay safe, and what compassion and love and gentleness did they need back then that can fulfill that need to keep carrying that story forward. And that, that can be a big story for some people in their life, particularly around food and around the shame of their body. And then, as we've talked about, then you add in society's take on it, and then you add in social media, and then you add in just all the not enoughness, right? The beauty industry, the whole thing, just it's huge. It's really, really huge. So, I know that for so many parents, they come from a place of, I don't want my child to feel how I felt. I don't want them to carry the same pain and the same stories that I have. And how can I change that? And so, as always, we'll start with you, and start with the gentleness and compassion, and going in and seeing what stories are there and what they need in order to start the path of healing, so that we do shift that story for our kids, because it's possible, and as we've said many times on our podcast, it takes great courage to change a story in our lineage. When we've had it passed down from generation to generation, it takes a lot of courage to go, actually, no. Whether that is around eating and our relationship to food, whether it is around shame, whether it is around yelling and hitting, whether it's around whatever, to be the one to say, actually, I'm going to change this, takes a lot of courage. And, I think that's where parenting gives us an amazing foundation to work from, to start changing these generational patterns, so that our children do not have to carry that story forward. There's so much courage in putting your hand up to say, I'm going to do this work so my children are free to be who they need to be.
Yeah.
Can I say I'm hungry now?
What would you like to eat, Lael?
I'm not really. I'm just thinking really. But I will have to make dinner soon. All right. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Marion, around food and feelings for adults?
Yeah, I just want to second what you said. Oh, I can hear the thunder, like massive thunder. It's such a powerful topic, and I want to second what you said. Number one, which is just meeting. The more we can meet all of this with compassion, whatever it is, whether it's the shame, the guilt, which I'm passionate about, shifting cultural conditioning, because we absolutely can get free from that, which is the other thing I wanted to say. We can change massively, like, both you and I have seen massive change in our lifetime. You can change these things, you really can. But just meeting ourselves with compassion. And one really yummy thing, and that one little idea is like, if you do have a particular food as a control pattern, it can be really helpful to actually ask someone to lovingly be with you whilst you have that thing. So I remember many years ago with a client once, a mentee, in a session, that they brought their favorite, I won't say what it was, I'll change it to something else, their favorite broccoli, and they just ate broccoli in the session. I just loved them and shared how much you're really loving that broccoli. So again, when we meet any of these places, any of these behaviors, any of these experiences with love and compassion, that is the most helpful place for them to transform. The more we judge, the more we shame, the more we restrict, the more likely things are going to get locked in, because all the younger parts of us go, no, I need to cling on harder. So anyway, you can meet yourself with more love, you can be around people who meet you with love and compassion, the more likely all of these things are going to shift more easily and more quickly.
That's so beautiful. Yes to all of that. Was that part of your offering, or is there anything else that you want to say?
No, what was I going to offer? Yes, so is there something showing up for you that you'd like to meet with some love right in this moment?
Yep. And my offering would be, is there something that you can eat that you love and that feels wonderful? And can you do it just full of love and joy, eating it and just relishing in the beauty of it? Can you give yourself permission to do that and just go, yes, this feels amazing. I'm wanting to have pleasure through this food, and that is awesome. And there is nothing wrong with that. And I'm going to just celebrate that. So I wonder if there's something that you can do.
Food and pleasure.
Yum.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that, I mean, we haven't really touched on that, but that's the other flip side of it. We have so much shame around it and too much, and I shouldn't have, and all this stuff. But what if we flipped it to being like, actually, it can be just such a wonderful source of pleasure, and you deserve pleasure, and you should celebrate in that, and eating with pleasure, and just like, this is amazing. Think of the energy that goes with that, is so different to we should only have this much. So, and that, look, pleasure is a whole other topic of, do we allow pleasure into our life? Do we believe that we can, we're worthy of pleasure? I mean, that's a whole other podcast we could do. But again, that food could be such a beautiful source of pleasure. And can you just allow yourself to have that, because you deserve it, because you just, you are a human being and we're designed to have pleasure. So can you just relish in that?
I would love to share one. I know we're on the tail end of this, but that's so synchronous, because that's what I realized with my loco loves that I was having every day, the chocolates. It's like, I get so much pleasure from these, and I would love to have that quality of pleasure with other things. And that's what's happened. So when I'm now having my porridge with the bananas and the blueberries, I eat and I'm like, oh my God, this is so gorgeous. Or my big plate of green veggies, I feel the same quality of pleasure, and it's just been so amazing. So again, it's really possible to shift these things, and there's a big lightning there. We really can change our relationship with food and feelings and pleasure and receiving and nourishment, all of this. That was just the biggest thunder I've ever had in my entire life. The power. And can you imagine, even just for mothers, can you imagine if we lived in a world where mothers just did that? I mean, to me, this is part of the cultural unconditioning, like, because most of the advertising wouldn't work anymore, would it? Because they'd be like, nah, I just love nourishing myself, and I have so much pleasure with the food I eat. And I don't need any of your advertising, thanks very much.
It's not going to work on me. Yeah, beautiful. Oof, good juicy topic. All right, well, part 2, which we will aim to get to next week, is going to be really around children and food and feelings, and we've got a whole lot of questions there that we're going to delve into as well. So we hope that this has been beneficial, or it's allowed you to kind of lean into a little bit around your own story with food and how that feels, and what you might want to shift or change, or what might need some more compassion in your life. Yeah, thanks for being here, everybody. Thanks always for sharing, and your beautiful comments and questions, and we really value everybody listening and sharing this work. It's amazing. So thanks for being here, everyone. We look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you so much, and so much love to you.